right, here we go with the third video that I'm making this morning. I hope that these are being helpful. I'm just going to let you know, if you are not interested in learning the Danielian handwriting, then you don't need to watch this video. This is specifically for the handwriting system that looks like this. We call it an italic style handwriting because the letters line up on a diagonal. And part of learning this system is learning how to make that diagonal. Now, just as a note, if your child makes Danielian style letters already, they're a third grader, they learn Danielian, and their letters do not slant, that is okay. I teach them the way that they are intended to be used because slanted or italic letters make it easier for students to then transition into an easily read cursive hand. So let me get rid of this for just a minute and let me remind you that Zehner Blauser, which is what K-12 uses if you've been in this program, are what we call ball and stick. Now again, if you have a very beginning writer, you may want to make sure the baseline is a very different color or thickness compared to the dashed midline and the solid headline. So again, ball and stick. The ball starts just below the midline and makes a full circle, and then you actually lift your writing tool and you make the stick that goes with the ball. There's the letter A, letter B. Notice that the tall letters in ball and stick start top to bottom. Again, I'm starting slightly below the midline and making another ball. A, B, C. A tricky letter in ball and stick handwriting is the letter E, straight across and around. Another tricky letter in ball and stick is the letter S because it has a switchback, but it's curved. Again, I'm starting below the midline, coming around, and forming that letter S. Notice that half-height letters should be between the baseline and the midline. This S drops a little bit below, not enough for me to correct a child's handwriting on this, but the ideal would be to have it completely between those two lines. Full-height letters should go from the headline to the baseline. Dropped letters, such as the letter J, start at the midline, or start with a ball and then start again at the midline, and drop down approximately the same distance. So here's the letter J. If they're doing a lowercase j, make sure that their dot is visible. Okay. Make sure that if they are doing a dropped letter, that it does not happen in this space. This is correct. I would not change it. This is incorrect. I would ask a child to rewrite that letter. That's the ball and stick. Danielian will look similar enough to your eyes, but sometimes for younger children, the fact that these letters have tails is very confusing. So you saw me lift my pencil, but you don't need to. Okay? Most people would expect students to do this way. Lifting the pencil, not encouraged. Okay? One smooth stroke is the goal for as many of these Danielian letters as possible because that is the goal when we transition to cursive. In cursive handwriting, when we move to that, and I'm going to demonstrate for you just so that you can see how that works. Remember that you don't pick up. There's the letter C. Here's the letter D. You don't pick up your writing tool until you're done with whatever you're writing. So I started here, and it's one stroke all the way through the end. And when I'm just starting to teach my students, sometimes they have trouble seeing that this is still a letter B. Let me demonstrate. Although I went in a different direction to make it, it is still the letter B. Here's my letter C. Here's my letter D. Here's my letter A. Okay? The only letter that changes in Denelian is the letter E, where it's made like this as a printed letter, and it's tilted even more. But you can still see it. It's just moved over. Okay? So that's the quick comparison. Now, how do we write the Denelian letters? We're at 6 minutes in. Okay, perfect. These are Denelian letters written by me for a previous lesson. This system is a fairly easy system to learn. Now, I was able to find on a website called thisreadingmama.com letter formation charts. And this letter formation chart shows you how to make the letters in the Denelian system. Now, changes that I make when I am writing. The letter B, I don't come down and go up and around, although that would make more sense in a lot of ways, given how the letter B is made in cursive. I stick with this way and then back up and around because it is very difficult for beginning or even advanced writers to get this shape by going just around. Okay, so one stroke, if they're showing a number 1 and they don't have another starting point, this is a one-stroke letter. G and then in. E is one stroke that way and then a second stroke that way. So some of these are going to be different. If you find a writing chart like this, you can choose to follow it, or you can use what you already know and combine the shapes. Okay, so just so you know, at This Reading Mama, she has the letters formed for right-handed and left-handed, and for the life of me, I couldn't see the difference. They have the same slant as far as I can tell. They use the same strokes. But just in case you have a left-handed student, you might choose to use this one just to help reinforce that. Another thing I would do with my students if I were teaching this is I would focus on just capitals or just lowercase. So if you're going to teach your child how to write Denelian, know that I wouldn't give them this chart and say, go for it. I would always teach each individual lowercase letter and then the uppercase letters. Here's the other thing I want to point out. We use lowercase letters more than we use uppercase letters. Your child needs to be proficient in lowercase letter writing. The uppercase letters for Denelian are pretty much the same as they are for Zehner Blaser. So again, notice that the letters, the W is a full height with Denelian. The M only dips down part way with Denelian. Pick what works. If you are used to writing the M with coming all the way down to the baseline in the middle, do it. If you're used to writing your W's just going to the midline in the middle, do it. But be consistent. That's the only thing for beginning writers and readers is they need some consistency. Okay, back to our letters. Now this I did on a narrower paper, but remember I was talking about how you can make or find paper to print. So here you go. Here's an example of a paper that was generated online and made printable. So again, it is considerably smaller than kindergarten width. This is a third grade width paper for end of year third graders. This size of paper, you wouldn't want to use a crayon. It's much too skinny. All right, moving on. Denelian. It's going to be easier for you to understand how these are written if you see them written by hand. So again, although in the classroom or at home, I would encourage my children to use a crayon or a pencil, for visibility, I'm going to choose to use a marker. All right. I'm only going to do the lowercase letters for you, partly because of time and partly because those are the more important letters. You can use any capital letter that you like, whether you're talking about printing or cursive handwriting. So here we go. Here are the letters. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H. Notice the tails on most letters. If they're finishing on the right, they're going to have a tail, even with the printed letters. I, J. Now, letter K in Denelian, please note. Note also I'm moving my hand to make sure I'm holding this paper carefully because this is a single stroke, but it has a little loop in it. This is a tricky letter for some of the younger children. This takes practice. The bigger the paper is for practicing this letter, the better. Here's the letter L, letter M, N, O again. Even though it's a different system, I'm starting slightly below the midline to make that one. Letter P, letter Q. All right. Now, please note, G, P, and Q are frequently confusing for beginning writers. B and D are frequently confusing for beginning writers. In Denelian, B and D are less confusing because D has a tail like a dog and B doesn't. D has a tail like a dog. The other letter that is confused with B frequently for beginners is the letter P. Most students do what we call a right-left reversal. Some students do a top to bottom reversal. Be aware that if your child is writing a letter in the wrong direction, pick the one that's used most frequently and focus on getting your child to write that letter so that that letter is perfectly ingrained. And then they will know, when I see this, it is always this letter. If they're having trouble with B and D, pick one of those and have them learn that letter perfectly. Then, once they have that letter, I would choose D because of the tail. If it has a tail, it's a dog. Dogs have tails. Dog is D. Okay? I would have them learn the letter D. It's used a lot in English. The letter B is used less often. Once they know the D, then they'll know B doesn't have a tail. And that's a big step. All right. L, M, N, O, P, Q. Letter R. Please notice the letter R starts on the left and curves around to the right. A common error, a very common error for students that I have had over the years, is that they start their R on the right. It still sort of looks like an R, but it doesn't flow correctly and it makes their handwriting difficult. If your child is making this error for the letter R, please help them correct. Start on the left, straight line, curve around. It will make a difference in their handwriting and you will see improvement. Starting this way, when they get going fast, can start to look like the letter V, and you don't want that. Here's our letter R. The letter S, again, it's tricky. It's got that reverse. Please notice that I'm holding that paper down with my hand that's not actively writing. Encourage your child to do this when they are writing. T is a full height letter. It looks like before you put the cross piece. I do point that out to my students. I say T has a crossing piece at the midline. Okay. Notice that J and L in Danielian look very similar. If your child's having trouble figuring out which direction to put the J, L is the one to focus on. We see this a lot more often. Here's our letter U. Here's our letter V. Here's our lowercase w, lowercase x. This is a tricky one. When I am teaching my students, I will allow this variant for the X. But do have them start with this left upper line and go in this direction first. Because when they transition to cursive, they want to know which part of this gets the cross piece. If this is the beginning of the X, then this is the cross piece. So make sure that they know X starts on this side. Here's our letter Y. And Z looks very much like the Zehner-Blaser Z. That's our lowercase Danielian alphabet. The capital letters, again, if you are really interested, you can see copies by typing Danielian. There are practice pages at thisreadingmama.com to show you the capital letters. In general, capital letters are going to look the same in almost any system. I do make my J's, my capital J, with a cap. And I do that because I want my students to see that the capital is not the same as the lowercase and to make it stand out as a full height letter. Okay, that's it. If you have questions after seeing this, please do let me know.